Okay, so, oh, oops, I've got to start the YouTube. Okay, actually, okay, we are going live. Okay, so that should, that should be going live. Should have gone live a little while ago. I don't know why it didn't, but it says that it's live, but we don't see what's going on here. So with that, let's okay, so that is there. All right, so we are live, focusing on skills here. Okay, those of you on YouTube, it looks like the YouTube stream may have started a little bit later. Remember, Romulus APUSH review is available on the App Store. It's just a little trivia app I made that I think is good for studying. Marco Learning's got free resources, free practice tests, and study guides available at marcolearning.com. And I've got a Fireside Chat premium session. We've already got 4 people in there. Up to 30 can join that session at 10 p.m. Eastern. So it looks like YouTube was just late getting started. Okay, so with this, while we're looking at this, somebody wanted to know, what if I don't know anything about the DBQ? What can I do? Okay, so depression DBQ. Okay, DBQ, don't know anything. Okay, so we see here that this is a causation prompt. Evaluate the relative importance of different causes of the Great Depression in the period from 1919 to 1933. So with that, I'm thinking in terms of, okay, so I'm going to need a couple of causes. Okay, so we're evaluating the relative importance of different causes. Cause 1, cause 2. Okay, so let's think about that, where we're thinking about the relative importance of these different causes. And so going from there, I'm going to go ahead and just note that. And so we've got, what are we going to do for cause 1 and cause 2? Now, let me see here. John Maynard Keynes, British economist, The Economic Consequences of the Peace, 1919. Okay, so in England, the outward aspect of life does not yet teach us to feel or realize in the least that the age is over. We are busy picking up the threads of our life where we dropped them, with this difference only, that many of us seem a good deal richer than we were before. Where we spent millions before the war, now we have learned that we can spend hundreds of millions and apparently not suffer for it. Evidently, we did not exploit the utmost possibilities of our economic life. All classes alike thus build their plans. The rich spend more and save less. The poor spend more and work less. Europe not only already owed the United States more than she could pay, but only a large measure of further assistance could save her from starvation and bankruptcy. Now, this looks like it could hit at 2 things. Now, if you have any chance at passing this exam at all, you should know that he is referring to World War I, right? Okay, so when we think about 1919, World War I, when we're thinking about this, so Keynes says people are spending more money, okay? So when we think about document 1, John Maynard Keynes, so John Maynard Keynes, wrote that basically after World War I, people were spending, more money than they had before the war. Okay. Now we're going to note this is, something that we would note that this is document 1. And then we could say something here, we could say here, he also noted that Europe was dependent on the United States. Okay. That the United States was the only thing. We'll note here, he also said that the United States was the only thing standing between, European economies going bankrupt. Okay, so European economies going bankrupt. Okay, so when we look at this, this is basically what I'm doing here is I have accurately describe the content of the document. Okay, so remember, quotes are insufficient to earn this point. Quotes are no good here. All right, and so accurately describing and quotes are no good to earn this point. So from there, then I would think about, well, wait, John Maynard Keynes, it said he's a British economist. Okay, and so what I would note here is, as an economist, I'm going to do point of view analysis. As an economist, Keynes, would have been in a good position Okay, a good position. Am I screen sharing right now? Maybe I am, maybe I'm not. For some of y'all, oh, okay. So some of y'all are not in the document. Sorry, I'm not screen sharing, but I need to. Okay, so going from there, let's go ahead and make sure we're screen sharing. So as an economist, Keynes would have been in a good position, okay? So basically in a good position to understand what was going on in the European economy, okay? So it looks, so he was probably correct in noting that World War I had impact, had bad effect on Europe. Okay, so had badly affected the European economy. Okay, now what we have to think about is if I'm trying to do this the simplest way possible, the buddy system. Okay, so what I'm going to call here the buddy system. Okay, so when we think about the buddy system, this is basically for every document has at least one buddy. Okay, so every document has at least one buddy. Okay, and by buddy, I mean this is a document that could pair with it in order to make an argument. Okay, these documents are not chosen at random. Okay, the people who make these DBQs, and I've written several over the past few years, that when I'm making a DBQ, I'm thinking about things. Okay, so when I'm looking at this, I'm thinking about like the causes of the Great Depression. Okay, and I'll go ahead and share a handout I've got there. Give me just 1 second here that I'm going to run in and get something here that I think will be helpful to you. Just a little study sheet going into the causes of the Great Depression. So with that, let me go ahead and share that in the chats. And remember, if you're on YouTube, you can stay on YouTube, or you can join us in Crowdcast. So causes of the Great Depression. All right, and hey, Mr. Bruno's class, thank y'all for your support here. Okay, so the causes of the Great Depression, and let me go ahead and run over to to YouTube here and add that into the chat as well. Okay, so causes of the Great Depression. Okay, so going into that, we've got this document here, and so when we're thinking about that, now we're not going to look at that document right now because we're going into this Socrates mode as if we know nothing. Okay, now another thing you'd be talking about is people spend more money. Now when we look here, magazine advertisement for Underwood typewriters, 1922. Okay, $3 down puts it in your home, direct from factory to you, standard Underwood typewriter. Now, I'm hoping that, if you're in a situation where you just don't even know what's going on here, you can't connect this into like consumer spending and stuff like that, that's going to be a problem for you, because a lot of these things, they expect you to have at least a cursory knowledge of what's going on here. Okay, so as far as that goes, let me just ask those of you in the Crowdcast, when we're looking at this, what we would think about in terms of, let's see, so let me run a poll. Okay, and so I am aware of a relationship. Okay, so of a causal relationship between between excessive consumer debt and the Great Depression. Okay, so as far as that goes, yes. Or, so yes, or I had no idea. Okay, let's think about that, because there's a certain point to where if, you're just like clueless about something, we've got some bigger issues here. Okay, but let's see how y'all, how y'all end up voting here. Okay, so going into that, okay, great. Okay, so this is one thing that I want to note is the odds of you running into a DBQ where you literally know nothing is pretty slim, okay, because the DBQs are typically going to be picked from large topics where, you know, you would really have, I mean, you're not going to know nothing. Okay. So for example, a few years ago, the DBQ was about the progressive era. A few years before that, hey, Lauren, and a few years before that, it was, you know, about imperialism. And the thing is, you know, you should at least have a little, you know, a little bit of knowledge here. And so going from, you know, so going from there, you know, this is, you know, this is something here, you know, with, let's see. So we're going to go ahead and share the screen here, and let's go ahead and take a look here. So yeah, so basically $3 puts it in your home. Okay, $3 down. This is kind of like a stimulus. These documents in some ways are stimulus based. Okay, when you think about it, the document should be stimulating something. And what I'm going to say here is if this does not stimulate something, then you've got some bigger issues here than, like, you know, not being, you know, not knowing anything about the DBQ. Odds are your multiple choice wasn't high enough to pass either. So this is one of those things that I'm glad to see that in the Crowncast poll that we just did, that this is something that it's like, okay, we know that we're going to be in a situation where we are, you know, at least knowing a little something about it. Okay, so we're going to note here that document 2. Okay, so document 2, we're going to note that, you know, the Underwood typewriter company, okay, so typewriter company, you know, offered their typewriters for, you know, a very small down payment. Okay, so payment, you know, the very small down payment so that the buyer could pay it off in installments. Okay, so we would note here that would be document 2. And then basically we understood what we just saw. Okay, and then I might even note, make a specific reference, you know, with just, you know, down payment of only $3. Okay, so a down payment of only $3, so you pay it off in installments. And what we would note here is that, you know, this was one of many advertisements. Okay, that encouraged consumers to purchase, you know, to purchase, you know, items on the installment plan. Now, this is historical context, okay? And I should know something about this. This is one of those things, you know, you get nervous about not knowing anything about the DBQ. It's kind of like, you know, where, like, you know, everybody has that dream about, like, you know, all of a sudden, like, you know, you're in school, you know, you're dreaming, but it's like you're in school, like you're in school in your underwear or something like that. You know, that kind of dream where all of a sudden it's like everybody's around you and it's just like you're at school and you forgot to get dressed and you're like, oh my goodness. And the thing is, I went through, like, elementary school, middle school, I guess you can even put in preschool, high school, college, graduate school. Not once did I ever show up for any class ever, like, having forgotten to put on an article of clothing. Does that make sense? Like, when we think about, like, our fears versus what actually happens is, you know, we've got these, like, irrational kind of things that are getting to us. And then we realize, wait, this actually, like, the odds of knowing nothing about the DBQ are so slim. Okay, so we would note here is during the 1920s, you know, consumers bought radios. Okay, so radios, you know, vacuum cleaners, and you know, and electric washing machines. Okay, so washing machines. Eventually, this got consumers into too much debt. Okay, so you're going to note here that basically what we've done here is we've provided some historical context. Okay, so we've got, like, what the document says, and then we're providing historical context. Now then we go into document, you know, let's go look at document 3 and see what we find there. John P. Wallace. Agriculture must have square deal. Wallace's Farmer, 1927. So the most important question before the country is relief for agriculture. President Coolidge has vetoed the McNary-Haugen bill, which, but that does not settle the question. No man, even though he be president of the United States, has that power. His action may delay the decision, but when 1/3 of the people of our nation are out of adjustment with the other 2/3, it is absolutely necessary that adjustments be made. The need of relief for agriculture is so vitally important to business as well as to agriculture that the fight must go on until something is done that will prevent the paralysis that such a delay means. Okay, now as far as that goes, what we can see here is, John P. Wallace. Okay, so what we'll note here is document 3. So John P. Wallace. So Wallace. Basically in a farmer's magazine. So basically in a magazine for farmers. Okay, so basically attacked President Coolidge. Okay, for vetoing a farm relief bill. Okay, so so he claimed that the farm economy was struggling, and needed help from the government. Now, as far as that goes, there's a cause there, right there in the documents. Okay, so and of course we would put here document 3. Okay, now as far as that goes, this is we're still kind of so we've got something about the farm economy. So far, we've got World War I, we've got consumer spending, we've got the farm economy. So we haven't really gone outside of the documents in order to tell a story, okay? And then, of course, we've got here the petition of Herbert to Herbert Hoover regarding tariff policy. And so we see here that this tariff. Now, we can see we should be able to make the jump to the Hawley-Smoot tariff, but we may not get there, okay? But, if you should have that. Now, let's go ahead and just kind of think about how many of y'all would be in that kind of position, okay? So, I would be able to note, okay, so if we think about this, I would, be able to, to identify a reference to the Hawley-Smoot tariff. Okay, so as far as that, yes or no, let's kind of see where we are on that. Okay, so the thing is, some of y'all are going to be able to do, most of y'all I think should be able to do this. Some of y'all won't be able to. Okay, so some of y'all, it may not be familiar to you. Okay, so a lot of you are going to say, I don't necessarily know that happened. Okay, so that is, that's something that, we just kind of have to think about. So yes, I will share my screen again. Yes, I'm going to put that on there. The screen is shared again. So with that, some of you may know that, some of you won't. If you do know this, if you do know the background, this will be a useful document to you. Now, one of the things, if you're trying to get, now one thing to note, if you get a 3 on the DBQ, you're probably not going to fail. Okay, so as far as that goes, that unless you did poorly on the other sections, okay, when we think about what we need here, now let's see, I've never used Marco Learning's, score predictor, but they've got a score predictor. I usually use Albert's, but let's see what they've got here. So we've got, let's see, U.S. history score predictor. Well, let's see. Okay, so as far as that goes, let's say you got, well, okay. So with that, let's say you got, okay, never mind, let's go. APUSH score predictor. Okay, or APUSH score calculator. Okay, so as far as that goes, in order to pass this exam, what we're looking for is to get about, like, let's say 30 on the multiple choice, let's say the majority on the SAQs, and then 3 and 3. Okay, so 3 out of 7, 3 out of 6, the majority on the SAQs, and 30 out of 55. That's basically a passing score here. Okay, so as far as that goes, if we're going through here, 5, crowd orderly and composed at a closed bank. Okay, and so we see here, crowds are out there in 1930 and they are outside of a closed bank. The policemen are there. They're like, oh my goodness, I lost my savings, all of that kind of stuff there. Okay. Now, President Herbert Hoover, campaign speech. Let's see what he has to say here in St. Paul, Minnesota, 1932. Now, notice here, one thing when we're talking about strategy is to identify a gap. You notice 1922, 1927, 1930, wait, what year did we miss, and what has never come up in the documents? Y'all tell me. There is a massive gap here in the documents. And this is where I want to reassure some of you, because y'all are thinking that it's going to be so hard to have outside evidence. But as far as that goes, there's going to be a gap in the documents. Like, whoever writes the DBQ intentionally creates a gap somewhere. Okay. And so as far as that goes, is intentionally creating a gap somewhere. And so where is 1929? And so what is not mentioned in the documents? What was intention? Yes. Okay. There you go. Okay. So as far as that goes, that, was familiar. And let's think about this. We've got the majority of you wouldn't be able to get a reference to Hawley Smoot tariff, but how many of you, know of a causal relationship, causal relationship between the stock market crash, so of 1929 and the Great Depression, so as far as that goes, me and not me. Okay. So as far as that goes, let's see where we are there. And what we want to think about is the outside evidence is typically not going to be, they're not making you rack your brain. Okay. They've already asked you about the multiple choice. And so with that, what they're trying to do here is they're trying to see, can you plug in outside evidence? And a lot of times it is obvious. Now, I always like to refer to the document as specifically as possible. Okay, so here's the thing. I am a big fan of making the most specific reference possible. So don't ask me, okay, here's the thing. Don't ask me, like, Richie, what if I don't do what you say? Okay, because the thing is, I'm laying it out here how to do it. Okay, so as far as that goes, that basically, can I, let's see. The documents that I'm using, actually, I don't really know if I want my DBQ going out there. So I'm going to keep my DBQ here, but I'm, it's like, it's there, when you see it. But yeah, I don't want my DBQ file out there, just out there in the public. Sometimes I share it with teachers, but I try to keep these files themselves in the hands of teachers. Thank y'all for understanding. Okay, so thank y'all for understanding. I'm sure y'all can understand why I would not want my DBQ files just circulating out and about. So with that, President Herbert Hoover campaign speech in St. Paul, Minnesota. Many of our hopes for the long view development of our nation have been interrupted by the necessity to devote our concentrated attention to the protection of the American people from the cataclysm which has swept over the world as the result of the aftermath of the World War. Okay, now here's the thing. When we're thinking about the aftermath of the World War, he says our opponents have endeavored to build a fantastic fiction as to the causes of these events in the last 3 years in order that they might blame the Republican Party. So with that, they might blame the Republican Party for all of the distresses and disasters which have happened, not only in our country, but in the rest of the world, and thus resort to the oldest trick in the book by stimulating protest votes. Okay, this is playing with human misery, Now, here's the thing. I've got what we had already was here as a result of the aftermath of the World War. Okay, so he's like, look, our opponents are basically trying to blame us, but they have deliberately avoided and decried accumulation of strains which grew out of the Great War. They even ignore that such a war took place. Now, here's something that we want to note here. Okay, is that Herbert Hoover in document 6. Now, we're going to note here again, like, when we look at document 6. Okay, document 6, we see that Herbert Hoover, at a campaign rally, blamed World War I for the Great Depression, and said that his opponents, were lying, were basically making up, other stories in order to blame him. Okay, so looking at that, that's Hoover. Now, what we're going to note here, we're going to say document 6. Now, again, a very clear reference to the document. Now, then I'm going to do point of view analysis. Okay, so since Herbert Hoover, was president and everyone, so basically, and everyone tends to blame the president when things go badly, okay, it's possible that Hoover was trying to, to deflect blame from himself, okay? Now, here's the thing. Document 6 has a buddy. If we think about the buddy system, document 1 and document 6. So we could say here, World War I was a cause of the Great Depression. Document 1, Keynes, and document 6, Hoover, okay? Now, here's the thing. So what we're going to say here is part of our, a topic sentence for a paragraph, okay? The way that we could put something together using nothing outside, okay? So, one reason, okay, so for the Great Depression, so one reason for the Great Depression was that, there were economic problems in the world after World War I, okay? And so with that, now this is where we could put in some additional context or outside information, but I'm going to do that in a second, okay? But let's go, and we're just going to copy and paste our document, what I've got here for document 6. I'm going to put that here, okay? And so basically, here is my argumentative topic sentence, okay? So I've got here an argumentative topic sentence, all right? And so, so then we've got a document reference, okay? So we've got a document reference here. Then, oh, oops. Then we've got, let's see. So we've got a document reference. Then we've got some, some basically purpose / kind of POV analysis, okay? And then we would note here, however, so we'll note here that we would say, however, okay, so however, this is something to note here that, however, Hoover was not alone in believing this. Okay, so believing this. And that's where I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go into Keynes, okay? So we're going to note here that John Maynard Keynes, a British economist, wrote that after World War I, people were spending more money than they had before the war. Okay, so as far as that goes, we see here once again we are referring to document 1. Okay, we're making a reference to document 1 here, and then we are going into some POV analysis. And so with that, we've basically used 2 documents and we've analyzed the documents using nothing outside in order to tell a story. Now, what I could note here is I could get into some contextualization or outside evidence here, depending on how the reader looked at this, that during the 1920s, the United States, had to bail Germany, Germany out, when they couldn't, when the Germans could not pay their reparations. Okay, so the Dawes Plan, okay, so the Dawes Plan saved Europe from a total economic collapse, okay, collapse. And, when the economy of the when the United States economy, okay, so when the United States economy failed, there was no one else to help, okay, since the rest of the world was already struggling. Okay, so that's something there that would be like, either depending on how the reader chose to count it, it more than likely be outside evidence, I think. Okay, that would be our, something like outside evidence. Now, I usually would put outside evidence immediately after the topic sentence or at the end of the paragraph. Okay, so I would put it immediately after the topic sentence or at the end of the paragraph. I would keep my documents together. I don't like I just think it's neater this way and it makes it easier on the reader, you see. And so as far as that goes, that's these are some things that I think are just good strategies. And then we could say here that we didn't go into the stock market crash, but what's something that's close? we see a closed bank. Okay, so what I'm going to say here is that we'll say here the collapse. Okay, so the collapse of the financial system. Okay, so the financial system, and that's where we would go into document 5, basically the crowd at a bank. And then we would say here the stock market crash. Okay, so this is outside evidence, and then the stock market crash. Now, what's important here is to know that this is something that most people could use. Okay, so in my Crowdcast poll, it's like not a lot of you necessarily knew about the Holly Smoot tariff, but we've got about 98% of you are like, yeah, I could definitely draw a link between the stock market crash. Okay, and so as far as that goes, that where we're going with this. Now, remember, if you're not already following me on Instagram, go ahead and let's just go ahead. I've actually got a new post about Harambe. We need to make sure that that is that's something that's something here. Okay, so give Harambe a little respect. May the 4th be with you, but my post here I said may the 28th be with you. So with that, go ahead and I'll be doing some shout outs later. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and and follow Marco Learning as well. My Insta is at Tom Richey. Okay, and notice here, yes, Raul was noting, and Raul's a teacher, is that now remember at Marco Learning is also a great thing to follow as well. And so, ladies and gentlemen, what we want to think of, that your own reasoning should go in here. And remember, ladies and gentlemen, Romulus APUSH Review, a little trivia app that I made, is $2.99 at the App Store. I feel like it's a handy little app. The questions are not stimulus based. They're not supposed to be. It's just basically, if you don't know the content, you're not going to do very well. So with that, what we're going to say here is that another reason, so basically, another reason for the for the Great Depression, or another cause of, right, if we want to use whatever thing here, so another cause of the Great Depression, okay, depression, was the collapse of the financial system in the United States. Okay, this included the stock market crash. Okay, so crash in 1929, which was a product of people speculating in the stock market. Okay, so the stock market, which meant, now note, always clarify what you mean, which meant that they were, they were gambling instead. So they were gambling for the short term instead of investing for the long term. Okay. So with this, and thinking about stock market speculation, is like when you look at the Microsoft stock price, that basically Microsoft went down 1.62 today. Like, okay, so Bill Gates is getting a divorce, but Bill Gates is retired. It's just like the stock market is such a, it's not real. Okay. It's not what the company is worth, but what people are speculating. And so with that, it's just really interesting how the stock market works like this. People get in, they speculate. It's like, oh, Bill Gates is getting a divorce, I better sell my Microsoft stock. And so the thing is, it's so funny how the stock market is really based on perception more than anything else. And so with that, that the stock market crash, people are speculating and they're gambling in the short term. Now, the thing is, though, then we would say some people were even buying on the margin, okay, which meant that they were, that they were putting only a little bit of their own money in and investing with borrowed money, okay? So investing with borrowed money. Because of this, when the stock market crashed, so a lot of investors not only lost their money, but were also in a lot of debt, okay? And so with that, you know, this is my argumentative topic sentence, right? I've got my argumentative topic sentence. Then I've got my outside evidence, okay? So I've brought in some outside evidence, and then I'm going to go into what happened at the bank, okay? So, you know, so there was basically, it's a newspaper report, you know, so we see the Philadelphia Record. There is a crowd at a bank that is just closed, and women are screaming at clerks, you know, because they've lost their money, okay? So, you know, so a Philadelphia newspaper, okay, and what I'll note here is banks failed, okay, so banks failed as well, okay, so banks failed as well. A Philadelphia newspaper, you know, notes that a crowd had gathered outside of a bank that, you know, had, you know, that had failed, you know, while, you know, some women in the crowd screamed because they had lost their savings, okay? And that would be something here, document 6, okay? And so one thing that we'll note here, now we could maybe do a little like forward context, okay? So if we're thinking about this, let's see, was this blue or purple? Was I doing the documents in blue? Yeah, the documents were blue. Okay, so as far as that, screamed because they had lost their savings. Now, you know, what I could say here is that this, you know, the bank crisis, you know, the bank failures, you know, so failures were part of what, you know, FDR later addressed, okay, in the New Deal, when he closed the banks, okay, and reopened them after creating the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, which, you know, which helped, you know, so the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, which, you know, protected people's money in the case of bank failure, okay? And that's something that basically, you know, I'm giving context for the document. It's stuff that's going on around the document, okay? Stuff that's not necessarily socially distanced from the document, standing right there. Now, this is outside evidence. The stock market, you know, and this is something, there's always going to be some kind of obvious outside evidence. Now, how do I make a thesis statement? See, collapse of the financial system and in the United States, okay? So what we're going to, you know, what we're going to do here, which destroyed, okay, people's, you know, people's savings, you know, which destroyed people's savings. Now, this is something here. Check this out. I'm going to go ahead and, you know, and copy, and then I'm going to paste that. I'm going to paste that here, and then we'll note here that I've got this. Now, this is going to be totally appropriate if we're talking about, so this is going to be totally appropriate if we're not going for complex understanding. Now, if we're going for complex understanding, we're going to have to rank the causes. But one thing that I'm going to note here is when it comes to complex understanding, if you 2 days before the exam don't know how to do complex understanding, it's over, Anakin. Don't try it. Okay, so this is the thing. Complex understanding, it really needs to be something that you're doing because you've done it many, many times, okay? The reason that, you know, it is May the 4th, right? So the reason why Obi-Wan Kenobi, this is actually something, some historical context for like this, you know, this like pseudo-historical event that basically like Obi-Wan Kenobi, if you'll look at like episode 1, The Phantom Menace, which isn't the greatest Star Wars movie ever made, but if you look at Star Wars episode 1, what Anakin slash Darth Vader, whatever you call him at that time, what he was trying to execute, this is exactly the move that Obi-Wan did at the end of episode 1, that where he was able to, you know, slice Maul in half. Okay, so basically, Obi-Wan, having executed that move before, he knew how difficult it was, okay? And so he knew how difficult it was, and so he's telling Anakin, don't try it, I have the high ground, and he's saying that as somebody who had tried a move and actually had been successful, but Obi-Wan knew how to defend against it. So basically, Obi-Wan was offering Anakin, you know, some historical context. Yes, y'all note the Bill of Rights Institute's YouTube channel. Okay, so you know, YouTube. Okay, so YouTube, Bill of Rights Institute. Now, let me show y'all, because tomorrow I will, yeah, so what I've been doing is at 6:30 p.m., I'm on the Bill of Rights Institute's YouTube channel. So make sure y'all join me there, because the party begins tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. at the Bill of Rights Institute's YouTube channel. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and you can set a reminder. You can go directly there right now. There are already 3 people waiting. Okay, so this is going to be one of those things. Let me go ahead and put that in the chat. So that's going to be at 6:30, and then at 8 o'clock, I'm going to be back here. Okay, so as far as that goes, let's go ahead and put that into the YouTube chat as well. You underestimate my power. All right, yes. And here's another thing. Like, if we're going to do like point of view analysis, remember, point of view analysis is my app. I'm trying to sell it. Romulus APUSH review. Let's see if it's gone up in the rankings at all. They don't update the rankings in real time. Oh, it actually went down a little bit. So hopefully, you know, once y'all buy it, it'll be up. But going from there, ladies and gentlemen, if we want to do like point of view analysis and we want to do Star Wars, that basically, like my phone ringtone, it's like it's got Obi-Wan saying like, Obi-Wan's like, Anakin, Chancellor Palpatine is evil. You know, and so here's the thing, like if we're going to do like point of view analysis, you know, so Anakin, Anakin, Chancellor Palpatine, okay, so Chancellor Palpatine is evil, okay, you know, and then Anakin says, from my point of view, the Jedi are evil, you know, so, you know, point of view, I wish somebody would call me right now so y'all could hear. I'm going to make sure my ringtone's on. The Jedi are evil. Okay, now here's the thing. Now, has anybody watched The Bad Batch today? I tell you what, like, wow, like that was something. Like, let me actually, I'm gonna run a poll. Okay, you know, who's you know, who has watched? Okay, and y'all have AP exams to prepare for, but you know, have you watched? Somebody actually called me. Have you watched The Bad Batch yet? Okay, yes. You know, so no. Okay, so with that, yeah, that's really my ringtone. Oh, oops, that's not okay. So I don't know what's going on there, but anyway, somebody called me. But yeah, so maybe they can call me again. I don't know, but I didn't have it turned up enough. Okay, so as far as that goes, yes or no? Have you watched The Bad Batch yet? Because The Bad Batch actually started off with some contextualization. I was like, oh my goodness, like okay, so most of y'all hadn't seen it, but the 2 of you that have watched it, or 3 of you, wasn't that beginning like it was like, oh my goodness, like I wanted to see that. Like I didn't realize how much I wanted to see that scene, but it offered context from something that we knew about had happened in Rebels and we'd never seen it before. And it was just like, oh my goodness. Like, I mean, it was just so amazing to get that context. Lauren, you're one that's seen it, but it was just like, wow, I'm not going to give it away, but it was just like, I mean, when I realized what was going on, I was just like, my hair stood up on my head. So with that, you know, that's something about, yeah, so great. I mean, yeah, the thing is, if somebody doesn't like me talking about Star Wars, I mean, it's relevant as far as skill base. So with this, what we would think here is, as a Jedi, you know, so a Jedi, okay, so you know, we see here as a Jedi, you know, Obi-Wan, okay, so Obi-Wan would have, you know, would have had a natural prejudice, okay, against Palpatine, okay, because Palpatine was a Sith, okay? The Sith and the Jedi were ancient enemies going back thousands of years, okay? Now we're going to note here that, you know, that Anakin, having fallen to the Sith, okay, so basically having joined the Sith, you know, was trying to provide justification for his decision. Okay, now we'll note also, as a Jedi, Anakin had, you know, seen the corruption of the Jedi Council. Okay, so Council, you know, especially when they, when they expelled, his Padawan, Ahsoka Tano, from the order under, so because of false evidence. Okay, so this is one of those things you can go into point of view analysis or historical context with just about anything. Okay, so just something to kind of think about when you're looking at something like this, that when we're thinking about historical context for documents. So the thing is that this DBQ that I've got here, thesis. Okay, so we've got a thesis statement. All right, we got a thesis statement. Then we've got 1, 2, 3 documents, and all 3 of those documents are, analyzed. So that's the thing. We've got we've got a thesis statement, 3 documents that are used, 3 documents that are analyzed, and some outside evidence. Okay, and actually, they might have even, a generous reader might give the contextualization point, but that was like a 4-point DBQ. So the thing is, I wanted to spend some time on the DBQ because that is a frequently, that is a frequent topic, and it's the one that got the most votes. Hopefully y'all are finding that, hopefully y'all are finding some of this stuff to be helpful. All right, so with that, so going from that, so when it's thank y'all so much. No, not Clone Wars. If I'm spoiling Clone Wars for you, like that's been out long enough to be your own fault. But with that, so I struggle with knowing the time periods, years that certain events happen. Okay, so with this, read what I would say, like there are only actually 2 dates. Okay, there are only 2 dates that I ask my students to memorize. July 4th, 1776, December 7th, 1941. Those are the only 2 specific dates. Okay, yeah, I think the LEQ is one of those things that, yeah, it's 15% of the exam. It's at the end. Remember, thesis and some outside evidence, you've got 2 points already. Okay, so if you can get 2 or 3 points on the board for the LEQ, it's pretty easy to do. I mean, it's one of those things, if you know how to write a good DBQ, you know how to write a good LEQ. Okay, but going on to, Mount Midoriyama, yes, this is great. Yeah, I agree with you there, Raul, that it's like, the LEQ is very easy if you use the same principles, have a thesis, have some outside evidence, and you can easily get a 3, okay, if you're just writing. But with that, the DBQ is so important. But going from there, when we're thinking about that, I love the American Ninja Warrior reference, by the way, that most dates, I think if you can get it in a half century or a decade. So like the First Great Awakening, for example, 1730s to 1740s. But if you know that it was between 1700 and 1750, you're good. Okay. The Stamp Act, I could know the Proclamation of 1763 was in, guess, 1763. Sugar Act, 1764. Stamp Act, 1765. Townsend Act, 1767. Now, I do this for a living, okay? So the problem there is, I do this for a living. So going from there, you could say that the Sugar Act, the Stamp Act, the Townsend Acts, they're all in the 1760s, okay? All of them in the 1760s. So that's something to think about with that. Okay. So I think the biggest thing is to think about like chunking things together and putting them in, putting them in places. Now, the other thing is to think about like anchor dates. Okay. So for example, the Missouri Compromise, like what if you can think about 10 things in US history that you can say, okay, 1800 election of Jefferson. So I know Jefferson's elected in 1800, then in 1820, the Missouri Compromise. So everything that's happening between Jefferson's election and the Missouri Compromise is happening between 1800 and 1820. Then we think about like 1820 to 1860. So the Missouri Compromise to the Civil War, what we think about as the antebellum period. So that's something that we want to consider as well. So just kind of chunk those together and think about, okay, these are some ways that we can, kind of put these into segments. But I would say that every 20 years or so, you want to know the specific year that something happened. Okay, so that's something that I think with there. Yeah, you will not have the rubric during the exam, but what you will have, let me show you what you will have. Now, You should be at the point now where you don't really need it. But what you will have during the exam is you will have this that basically says, you know, what they're expecting. But here's the thing. By the time you go in there, this is a time test, okay? So by the time you go in there, you really should be at the point where you know what's expected of you. Like, for example, my students on their last couple of DBQs in a year, I don't give them the rubric anymore. I stop giving them the rubric, okay? So that's something that I do with that. So going from there, you will see this, but it's something that hopefully you're at the point where you don't feel like you need to read it. Now, the dates to remember again, the two dates, that would be July 4th, 1776 and December 7th, 1941. Those are the only two dates that I tell students you need to know these specific dates. So as far as that goes, the LEQ, if you don't know much about the topic, it's tough. Now, the thing to think about, though, is how do we get that first point on the LEQ? So let's go ahead and look at the LEQ rubric real quick. And so when we think about the APUSH LEQ rubric, okay, so the APUSH LEQ rubric, we're going to see here as we look at this thesis, okay, having a thesis statement, same kind of criteria, making a claim, having a line of reasoning. Now, note here the first evidence point provides specific examples of evidence relevant to the topic of the prompt, okay? Now, note here, evidence 2 supports an argument in response to the prompt using specific examples and relevant examples of evidence. Now, note here, for the first point, you basically just need to have like two things that you mention. You don't just name drop, you actually bring them in, but two things relevant to the topic of the prompt. So when we think about that, it doesn't even have to be like, supporting anything. It doesn't have to be relevant to an argument. It's just whatever the topic of the prompt is. So basically, if the topic of the prompt is the American Revolution, like if you bring in like two things that have like any like relevance at all to the American Revolution. So if if it's anything about the American Revolution and you start writing about Thomas Paine's Common Sense, and it doesn't really have any connection with anything you're writing about, but the reader is instructed that is relevant to the American Revolution. It's relevant to the topic of the prompt. And so that is a pretty easy point to earn. So there's really no reason why somebody could not, who's got any chance of passing the exam, could have a thesis statement and then could just start basically doing a data dump. Go into like 3 or 4 things, however much you've got time to write. On the LEQ, it's really one strategy that I would say that if you don't know what you're doing, one thing to note here is they use something called positive scoring, okay? And by positive scoring, they don't deduct points from anything you do wrong, okay? So positive scoring means that, they see something that gets points, they give you points. There is no point deduction, okay? So with that, it's like go in here, whatever that prompt is, whatever that's anywhere around it, start writing it down, okay? And hope that that reader says, okay, I found something there, I found something there. If you can get just a couple of points on the LEQ, I would say you really only need to get like 2 points on the LEQ for the LEQ not to cause you to fail. Okay, because on both the DBQ and the LEQ, the average score is like a 2-point something. So if you can get 3 points on both of those, assuming that you didn't do poorly on the multiple choice and the SAQs, then you're really in like a pretty good situation there. So that's something that you want to note here. So going from there, what you want to that's what you want to consider is just try to get a few points. Now, a couple nights before the exam, it is not the time to try to, now I'm going to learn to write an LEQ. That ship has kind of sailed. But with that, to read the question and be able to understand what they're saying so that you can answer the question correctly, I don't know what we're What you're getting here at there, Madison, and that's got like 16 upvotes, but that is now the multiple choice. It really just depends. A passing score on the multiple choice, like for the multiple choice to be you're heading toward passing, I would say a 30 out of 55. Basically, for the most part, you are looking to get like close to half or just more than half of the points. Okay, so as far as that, yes, and Raul's reminding you, you are more than a score on the test. All right, so as far as that goes, when we're thinking about multiple choice strategies, so Ryan, now remember, ladies and gentlemen, that I am going to be hosting a fireside chat after this, okay? A fireside chat, and that is, of course, that's in Crowdcast. And so that is a premium event. I'm going to be hosting one tonight, and I'm going to be hosting another one tomorrow night. Okay. So as far as that goes, there is a link to the fireside chat. I'm going to go ahead and put something in here for those of y'all who are here in YouTube. That's going to start at 10. But with that, let me go ahead and I'm going to show y'all how to get to the Richey doctrine. Okay. So when we're talking about multiple choice strategy, I've got this online, the Richey doctrine, which you think about the Truman doctrine, the Eisenhower doctrine, all of that. Just search for the Richey doctrine and you see AP history multiple choice tips. Now, one thing that you need to note here is the stimulus is not always necessary. Okay, so basically the stimulus, I would say that for somebody that's going to get a 5, they could do about 60 to 75% of the test without even reading the stimulus passages, looking at just the attribution and maybe the first sentence or so, okay? That if somebody really knows their stuff, there are a lot of cases where, you spend like 5 seconds on the stimulus, you're like, I know what that is, and then you go and answer the questions. Now, there are other, questions where, especially for those of you on your way to a 3, the stimulus can be helpful, okay? And then there is where the stimulus is unhelpful, okay? So that's another thing that we're going to see. When the stimulus is unhelpful, I'd say about half the questions are just straightforward questions. The multiple choice section is what the College Board did was in 2015, they dumbed the exam down a lot. They reduced the scope of what students need to know. And they like to claim, because that's how they make their money, that this test is just as rigorous as the previous test. Now, what they did, though, is that, the test, they said it's just as rigorous, but what they did is it's actually not just as rigorous, okay? And so with that, but they make it look, okay, they make it look more confusing. And so they make the test look harder so that people will think that it is harder. And thank you, Minoza, Grace, Grace Gunner, Sel, Jasmine, Grace Yun, and Turtle, for your support on Instagram. Thank you so much for that. All right. So going for that, you have to think about, is the stimulus necessary, helpful, or unhelpful? So here's something. Now, a lot of y'all are not, there are some of you that aren't going to, this is just, some of you are going to get this, some of you aren't. But let's think about this. So let's see that I've got a couple of stimulus-based things that I've got here. So first of all, let's say, okay, so on this one, you've got Charles Lindbergh, speech in Des Moines, Iowa, 1941. Now, I would say that there are not very many of you that would necessarily know this one. So when we see this one, speech in Des Moines, Iowa, 1941. Now, the teachers know Charles Lindbergh, 1941. Some of y'all already know what this is about. Let me know in the chat if you can already tell me like what this speech is going to be about without even looking at it. Okay, so let's see if there's anybody in the chat that is thinking like, hey, I've got, I know what this is already. Okay, I see Charles Lindbergh. I see 1941. Well, we know it's going to be something about World War II. Okay, but now specific. Oh, okay, yes. Okay, Kristen, you are on track to a 5. Okay, I'm just saying, like, I can't guarantee you a 5. Yeah, so we've got here that Owen, yeah, so Angelina, those of you who are saying that, like, yeah, basically, you know, actually the opposite, Jada. Okay, so basically what's going on here is those of you who already knew, like those of you who've been like reading through books, like, you know, okay, some of you are like, you know, so you got this. So yeah, so Kristen, that was excellent. Okay, so Charles Lindbergh, what we're going to see here, some of you may already know about Charles Lindbergh's role with the America First Committee. Like basically Charles Lindbergh, 1941, it can only be about one thing. So if y'all know this, y'all would go into this, okay? Now, here's something to note, though. 1941, Lindbergh, the European War. Watch this. I don't think we necessarily even have to look at this. Like, watch. Which of the following best represents the views of the majority of Americans regarding the European War at the time that Lindbergh delivered this speech? Now, what we want to do here is, what the problem with the APUSH multiple choice is, a lot of people are used to, when you take a non-AP class, that, you know, you've got one right answer and 3 wrong answers, and it is, you know, it's looking at something as far as that goes, that it is, you know, you're looking at something here that, you know, you've actually here, there are 3 types of incorrect answers: out of period, irrelevant, or wrong. Like some of these, the out of periods are so, like, if you're looking for out of period, it's so great because it's liberating to see this one's not even in the right time period. And so you cross it out. Kind of like if this were something on colonial agriculture and there was something about cotton, and you're like, out of period. Then irrelevant. Okay, irrelevant means that it's there's nothing wrong with it, but it has nothing to do with the question. And then there is wrong. Okay, this is a wrong answer that's usually going to be the opposite. Okay, so out of period, irrelevant, or wrong. And so the thing is that, you know, we should know, like, this is testing not the stimulus, but the key concepts. So 1941, odds are it's before December 7th, okay? But with this, they were unconcerned about the rise of fascism and totalitarianism. We would cross that out. That is not the case, okay? Americans weren't unconcerned. It was like, okay, that looks, you know, Americans weren't like, you know, hey, you know, that Hitler thing he's doing over there is great. But, you know, so they're not unconcerned. That would not be, you know, a correct thing. They supported an embargo in response to impressment of American sailors. That is out of period, okay? That is the War of 1812. So this is out of period. They favored American military intervention against Germany. No. D, they preferred for the United States to remain neutral in the conflict, okay? Now, this is one of those things we didn't need to necessarily, we saw 1941, and it's like, okay, well, let's look and see what's going on here. Now, as far as that goes, 2, which American president would have been most likely to support the ideas in Lindbergh's speech? Now, for those of you who already knew about Lindbergh's role with the America First Committee, you know already. For those of you who don't, so the thing is, for those of you who don't, you're going to need to go to the stimulus and see, okay, what is this? Okay, it is now 2 years since this latest European war began. From that day in September 1939 until the present moment, there has been an ever-increasing effort to force the United States into the conflict. That effort has been carried on by foreign interests and by a small minority of our own people. But it has been so successful that today our country stands on the verge of war. At this time, the war is about to enter its 3rd winter. It seems appropriate to review the circumstances that have led us to our present position. Why are we on the verge of war? Was it necessary for us to become so deeply involved? Who is responsible for changing our national policy from one of neutrality and independence to one of entanglement in European affairs? Personally, I believe there is no better argument against our intervention than a study of the causes and developments of this present war. I've often said that if the true facts and issues were placed before the American people, there would be no danger of our involvement. Okay, so we should know by now, okay, this is, you know, he's wanting non-intervention, or AKA isolationism. And so who's going to be the American president that sounds like this? Okay, so it's like, okay, Abraham Lincoln seems kind of irrelevant here. And then definitely not Roosevelt. He's attacking Roosevelt. George Washington. Okay, so basically, Lindbergh is wanting to, go with George Washington's foreign policy. And so then American public opinion on foreign involvement changed significantly when. Now, note here, there is no reference to the stimulus here. 1941, all of these questions were about World War II and American foreign policy, and especially Americans who, didn't want to get involved in the war. So with this, now note here, they will be vague. They're not going to come out and say the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. You see? They're going to be very vague. So look for them to be vague. And then you're like, okay, attacked by a foreign power. They're referring to Pearl Harbor. Okay. So this is just like one of those things where, like that friend that like never like just says what they're thinking. And they just kind of like, they're always speaking to you in riddles. And you're like, just come out and say what you're trying to say. That's the thing there as far as that goes. So going from there, we see Americans became more aware of the humanitarian crisis in Germany. Now, one thing we want to understand, Americans did not want to get involved in World War II because there was, as far as that goes, this wasn't Americans wanting to get involved in World War II because they are, there's a humanitarian crisis. Okay. So they want to get involved because we were attacked by the Japanese. Fear that a Soviet victory would bring communism to the United States. Now, remember, the Soviets are our allies in World War II, and this is kind of like going with the Red Scares. Newspapers began printing sensational stories that provoked the public. Now, that is something that is a reference to yellow journalism, which is the Spanish-American War. So there we see here that it's just these questions, you're eliminating answers based on their out of period, irrelevant, or wrong. Usually you can eliminate two pretty easily. Then look at the other two, think about it a second, and then go ahead and pick one and move on. My advice, like some people are complaining that the digital exam is going to make students answer questions one at a time. And I'm like, good, because that's actually good good multiple choice test taking here. So that's something that I think is very important. Just questions one at a time. Don't second guess yourself or anything like that. Okay, so going from that. Thank you, Omar, if you're talking to me. So as far as that goes, thank you so much for that. And so going with that, do y'all want to see me do another set? Because I've got another set on. We've been talking about the Great Depression. So as far as that goes. Let's go ahead and look at something here. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at something on, and this is something I think that further underscores my point. Okay, that these questions are testing the CED. Okay, they're not testing the stimulus. They're testing your knowledge of the course and exam description. So again, President Franklin D. Roosevelt, first inaugural address, 1933. Now, those of you who are about to make a 5 on this thing, again, you're probably going to be in a situation where I know what this is, okay? I know what this is. This is the Depression, all of that, okay? So let's try it. The speech excerpted most directly reflected a growing belief in the 1930s that the power of the federal government should be used too. Now, note here, during the 1930s, okay? Now, was there a growing belief in the 1930s that the federal government's power should be used to guarantee the civil rights of African Americans? That is out of period because that is after World War II. So we know that one's out of period. Then provide direct economic relief for unemployed Americans. That sounds like Roosevelt and the New Deal. C, deregulate transportation industries to stimulate the economy. Now, FDR is not a deregulator, okay? FDR increased government oversight and regulations. C sounds a little more like Reagan and kind of the opposite of what FDR is doing. D, strictly enforce prohibition laws to combat organized crime. Now, prohibition is on its way out. Remember, 1933 is the year that the 18th Amendment is actually repealed by the 21st Amendment. So going from, going from there, that's what we're seeing here. So this is one of those things, B, that FDR and the New Deal, it repositions the U.S. government to take responsibility for help providing direct relief to Americans who are suffering economic hardships. Now, which